Hi, guys.
Hey.
So it's February, the month of love.
The month of love.
So we're talking about self-love this month.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch about it.
Love yourself.
Yes. And we're starting it off with a bang. We're going to talk about something that is very important to us and probably to a lot of parents.
Yeah.
Teaching self-love to your kids.
Yeah. How the fuck do you do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
We actually, both have came from a place where we did not love ourselves.
Mm-hmm. As kids.
And, so it's very interesting to me how our kids are abundantly full of self-love.
Wade, when we were talking about this, said that Kyrie does not need any more self-love. And that she's good where she is. She's tapped out.
Yeah, same with my daughter too. She loves herself, and I love that for her. Like, she knows her worth and all of that. So how did our kids come from, or how did our kids learn that is basically what we want to share with you guys today, is how did we as parents, we're all just doing the best we can here, okay? So nobody get down on yourself, but how did our kids develop that, and how did we contribute? Well, we both asked our kids, actually, so we'll be talking about that a little later.
And if you're a parent out there whose kids don't love themselves, that's not the end of the road. Like, things can still be improved.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So it just, you said don't give yourselves a hard time, and that made me think of that, and I thought it was an important thing to bring up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you think that kids learning self-love is something that you have to be actively thinking about, like trying to implement into your kids, or do you think that it can happen without trying?
I think that it could be both. Based on what I've learned from my child, it could be both.
Okay.
Because she brought up things that I didn't even realize I was doing that directly impact her, her self-love and the way she looks at herself and the way she treats herself. So we'll talk about that a little later, but yeah, I think it could be both.
Yeah, I think you're right, because there are some ways I really wanted my kids to love themselves because I didn't love myself growing up, and I just thought, how much more wonderful could a childhood be if that were different? And so I wanted that for my kids because I didn't have that. So I was very much actively trying to make sure they love themselves, which I feel like some kids are really open to, and other kids maybe have a little harder time with that. Like, they don't necessarily want to love themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I feel like you can actively try and do your best, but even at the end of the day, that's no guarantee your kids are gonna love themselves.
Well, and then it's
personal.
It's their choice. It's completely up to them. You just kind of have to, like anything with parenting, you just have, it's up to the kids, but you have to
set the foundations.
Yeah. Give them the tools. So, and I think that's what I did with my daughter, is I gave her the tools. Because of the education that I had, I knew that it was important to instill her with these tools and connections and lifelines and, affirmations or whatever. Like, I knew that was all important. And so I just shot them out whenever I could and hope for the best. It's kind of like, that's kind of how parenting works.
Okay, so we asked our kids, but before we talk about what they say, tell me what you thought before you asked her that you were doing right or wrong.
So if I were to, I don't know if I thought about that before I asked her, but I mean, I just knew that it was important for kids to feel emotionally supported. And so I just did things to help her with that. Like, I remember thinking it was so important when she was younger to read to her every night. Because I knew that was good for her development. I knew that was a bonding time. I knew, so I did little things like that. Like, I would read with her. I would intentionally get down on the ground when she was a baby, and I would play with her. And I would, if I was disciplining her, I would look her in the eyes and we would talk about it, and I would get down to her level. Like, I knew all of those things were important.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't relate them to self-love, though. So it was interesting to me to hear her response, because that was kind of along those lines, you know, of like the younger stuff.
Did you feel like you were doing, or do you think you did anything, not wrong, I don't want to say wrong, but like that maybe wasn't in the direction of teaching her self-love?
Yeah, because I was in a growing. Have you guys heard the term, and maybe, you know, you can give a comment if this was you, but like the idea of growing up with your children. You know, so that was kind of what I did, because I had her. We were both pretty young moms in the scheme of things, you know, not teen moms, but like young moms.
I was 19, so technically I was
technically
a teen mom.
I was 21 when I had her, so I was like a baby. In the moment, I was like, okay, I'm grown, you know?
Yeah, I'm totally grown. I know what I'm doing.
But like looking back on it, like I grew with my child, you know? And so I think the one thing I would have hoped, which you can't change anything, but is just to be a little more grown, just to know more. Like if I had her now, with the things that I know now, it would, you know, I don't know if it would have changed anything. Honestly, I don't know if it would have changed anything. Like,
have you seen those videos on TikTok and stuff where it's like, to my firstborn child, I'm so sorry that I had no idea what I was doing with you. You were like my tester.
The guinea pig.
Yeah.
Well, I only had one, so.
I feel that way, though. Like, I feel like I know so much more now, like, with my 10-year-old than I knew with my 18-year-old. And, like, you just can't know things that you don't know yet.
Yeah. For sure. And so I would say, I wouldn't say that I did anything wrong, because we're all just fucking trying. We're all just trying to make it work and hoping for the best.
Yeah.
But I definitely would have hoped to have been wiser, or at least knew that I didn't know everything.
Yeah.
Because I think when you're that young and you're like, I got this.
I think for me, like, I thought my kids' answers didn't super surprise me, but kind of surprised me. But I thought before I asked them that they would say basically, because I was always loving them and always, like, I don't know, just momming them, that helped build their self-love. And I think where I went wrong, or where I could have, like, if things had been different.
I don't like that
I know,
word.
not wrong, but, like, where things could have been different in an alternate universe. Could have been if I had loved myself more when I had my first child, to set the example of what that looks like, because they're watching us and they're emulating us, and I feel like they learn from what they see more than from what we say sometimes. And I think I was still, like you said, still growing, and I still had a lot of work to do in that area, and it took me a while. And I think that they're growing with me now. So, like, I think my firstborn kid wouldn't be like the kid that you thought, like, is super cocky and super in love with himself. Whereas my second child definitely is in love with herself.
I love that, though.
Yeah. But I think because of the different times in which they were born and who I was at the time.
Yeah. I only have one to relate it to, but I do think that we did our kids a service. You know, we definitely instilled something in them, because we were consistently growing with them. So they were able to see that,
and I'll tell you
that's
what,
amazing.
Sometimes, like, especially with my firstborn child, I will see him learn stuff almost like osmosis. Like, I'm learning it and figuring it out and changing and evolving, and as I'm doing it, it's like his DNA is changing or something. Like, he's growing with me without even trying.
Yeah.
So I just find that really interesting. Okay, tell me what your daughter said when you asked her.
So Ella, it was so funny, because, like, I asked her while we were driving yesterday, and I was like, so I'm gonna do, I know we have a lot of driving if you guys have teenagers, I'm sure you know the driving conversations. Like, give a little hand raise or a like if you if you've ever had the driving conversation.
I feel like it's easier because they don't have to make eye contact.
There's no eye contact. You're doing something else you're focused on. Actually, there was this, sorry, I'm going to squirrel. There was this presenter that I saw at one of my work conferences, Josh Ship, the one I sent you.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about that. He's like, if you have to have hard conversations, do it while you're driving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because then both of you are distracted. You don't need to make eye contact. You don't have to touch each other. But you're in a car. You're stuck in a car together. So they have to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
Or you have to talk to them, vice versa. Anyway, okay. So, we were driving. We were in the car. And I just said, hey, we're doing an episode on how to teach your kids to love themselves, or, you know, teaching your kids to love themselves, or whatever that looked like. And she said, and I said, what is something that I've done to help you to love yourself? And she, like, right off the bat, like, she knew I was going to ask her. She was fucking ready.
She was prepared.
Yeah. And she goes, the one thing that I absolutely loved is how you instilled healthy eating habits. Or, like, good eating habits. I mean, guys, I like a cheeseburger, or French fries.
Some Ben & Jerry's cookie dough, man.
Yeah. So, I like all that. Like, trust me, I'm a solid 80-20, okay? Like...
I try to be a 99-1, but I don't ever succeed with that.
I'm a solid 80-20. But I've always, like, made sure that she had her fruit and vegetables, and made sure, like, she understood the importance of why she needed to have those. And, like, that was just something as a mom that was super important to me.
Well, and as a teenage girl,
was diet.
When you're growing up.
Not diet, but...
And if you're not eating healthy, you're having acne, you maybe have weight problems, and it's a cruel world in high school, man.
Yeah.
And junior high. Like, people are mean.
So, and then also, you know, she said, because you always, you know, we always ate at home. And I was like, well, that's because we were fucking broke. You know, like, I was a single mom, so I lived off of WIC and, you know, sometimes food boxes or, you know, whatever else I could scrounge together. So, I mean, I wasn't, like, poor. I was just...
struggling.
Single mom.
Yeah.
You know, income. That kind of thing. So we had a couple struggle meals, but we usually ate at home because it was expensive to go out. Like, we'd go out to dinner for special occasions, not, you know, on your typical Wednesday night. And so it was a lot easier for me to, like, cook at home and do all that. So she grew up with me doing all that and cooking at home. And she would be in the kitchen with me. Like, she would be in the kitchen with me when she was, like, 3 or 4 years old. You know, like cooking breakfast and dinner and stuff like that.
So did she mention, like, the quality time to spend at home?
Not really. So the one thing she did mention was just always being intentional about doing things together. Like, even to this day. Like, if I feel like we haven't had a lot of quality time because life just gets busy, I always intentionally was like, hey, let's go do something this Saturday. Like, let's spend time together. You know,
I need to do that better.
I would say
we spend a lot of time together, but not.
It gets hard though when they're teenagers. They have
so
their
much going
lives.
on,
Yeah. I mean,
and there's so many of them in my case that it just sort of complicates it sometimes.
So, I think that's good. Is I've always been intentional to spend time, and like there was a conversation we had a little while ago. Like, I used to take her to the library, or take her to go do, like, the little Lowe's workshop thing. Do you remember that? Or, like, always have her in some kind of sports, or like, activities, or, like, you know, like, the nature center camps. And she's like, I remember you always doing that for me. And I'm like, well, partially that was a little selfish, because I needed, like the camps that they put on in the summer.
I need 5 minutes to...
A lot cheaper than a babysitter.
Yep.
So I'm like, you're going to camp.
Yep.
You know, it was like a day camp. It wasn't like I was sending her off. But yeah, so it was like I was always doing stuff like that. But, you know, it's partially because I was like, oh, if you can spend 2 hours doing this camp thing, I can go grocery shopping or do a little laundry or, like, you know.
Preach.
You know, have some me time. Yeah, and she always... me and her have also talked about, like, because I'm an only child. She's an only child. Her dad has passed away. The only family that we have here is my dad, which he's amazing and, you know, does everything and hangs out with us and all of that. But, like, we don't have a lot of extended family. Mm-hmm. So, like, but yet she was always around brother and sister and uncle and aunts and stuff like that. So mm-hmm. that was something else we've talked about before, is, like, always having that family-esque
dynamic
going on. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's why she likes to go over to your house. She's like, I'm gonna go over there to their house on New Year's. Kyra's not gonna be there, but there's plenty of other people I can hang out with. Like, she just comes over and she's part of the family.
She is part of the family. Her school picture's hanging on my wall.
I love that. You know? So, anyways, tell me what your kid said.
So, I started with my daughter because I knew she'd be the easiest. She's my 16-year-old. And she's the one that super loves herself. And I said...
I love that for her.
I said, in what ways do you think, like, me and your dad contributed to you loving yourself? And she's like, well, it's different for you and for Dad. She said, for you, it's like you were always pointing out the good things about me. Like, things that I would have normally felt self-conscious about or down on myself about. You were always explaining why these things were okay and why it was okay for me to be different. And why you loved me so much. And you're always telling me how much you love me. And with Dad, it's less that. Like, he was teaching me, like, I have value. Like, if I do a job, you make sure you get paid because you have value and your time is worth money. And, like, kind of in a business way, but also he taught her through his personality because he super loves himself. And she's gotten her cockiness from him, I say.
Got it.
And she totally agrees with that. She definitely has the cockiness from her dad. But there's, like, a more maternal, like, feminine self-love that she gets from me. And she attributes that to just me pointing out all the wonderful things about her and just continuously telling her how much I love her and how worthy she is of love. And then when I asked my 18-year-old son, I didn't ask the 10-year-old because he's not there yet. But
still growing.
Yeah. But the 18-year-old, I asked him, first I had to say, okay, serious answer, bro. Like, because teenage boys cannot give you a serious answer. They only want to give you a sarcastic answer. And he gave me about 3 sarcastic answers before I got to a serious answer. But he eventually said, basically, well, I don't know, like, because anytime I would say something... okay, so I was like, how did I teach you to love yourself? Do you love yourself? I guess. How did I teach you to love yourself? Because you'd, like, yell at me if I said anything opposite of loving myself. And I was like...
Classic conditioning.
I'm like, well, did that work? And he's like, I guess. And what's interesting to me, on a side tangent, but that's still related, we have one of his best friends living with us, who is also 18, who was living in an adopted family, who I'm sure loves him very much. But he did not feel loved because there were kids there that were not adopted who were birthed to those parents.
Yeah.
And he could feel the difference between those two types of love. And he's like, my son being joking, he's like, Deegan, how did having parents that didn't love you make you feel? And actually edit that out because I want to say that over again without his name.
Okay.
And he was like, dude, how did it feel to have parents that didn't love you? And he was like, oh, it basically made me want to kill myself. And I was like, oh, well, that breaks my heart into 1,000 pieces.
Yeah.
Because these kids, my assumption, my theory, is that these kids learn to love themselves in a lot of ways based on how well their parents love them.
Or, you know, Ella said something interesting because simultaneously in the same conversation, we stopped at the bank and I was sitting and waiting in line. And if you know Leanna, she's not the most patient person, okay? Like, that is something that I know that I struggle with, and I'm trying. I'm really trying. But it comes out every once in a while, and so it came out right then and there. And so she was... I was like, man, this car hasn't moved in like a minute. And she's like, Mom, we haven't even been here for a minute. I was like, okay, like she'll call me out on that kind of stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not a patient person. Like, thanks for the reminder. And then I was like, that's one of the things that you learned from me, that because I didn't have it.
Yes.
She learned
Sometimes you learn
patience
things from your parents by what they don't have. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
So it kind of reminded me of that, because he, does this friend of your son's have self-love? Did you guys talk about that? Is he learning it?
I think that's something he's still going to have to do some work on. I think that he likes himself okay, but I think love is too strong of a word, if I had to guess. I didn't straight up ask him, but if I had to guess based on what I've observed.
Mm-hmm.
And man, that's enough to just break your heart into 100 pieces, because he's such a sweet kid.
Yeah.
And I'm sure these parents weren't trying to make him feel like they weren't. I'm sure they were doing the best they could. Like, right. I'm sure they do
Everybody
love
just
him.
does the best they can.
But sometimes people perceive things differently than we're trying to show them.
Right. And then there's a lot of psychological, like, let me just, like, put on my social working hat for a second. There's a lot of psychological things that happen
with adopted kids.
With adopted children who have been in the foster care system. Like, there's a lot of trauma there. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just can't push past that trauma. Mm-hmm. In the time that you are raising that child, to be able for them to say, I love myself. Mm-hmm. But like I said, you just drop the tools, you drop little, call them love bombs, I guess. Mm-hmm. Drop little love bombs every once in a while, and they'll pick up on it.
Yeah, and it's a journey. Like, if your kid is one of the kids that's out there struggling with loving themselves, it doesn't mean you're a failure as a parent. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. Like Leanna said, we're all doing the best we can. Mm-hmm. And sometimes this is a journey they have to go on. I had to go on that journey. You had to go on that journey. I don't blame my parents because I didn't love myself. Like, that's just the circumstances that mm-hmm. came to be in my life. Mm-hmm. And I had to work through that. Right. And I've recently become very, very grateful for my struggles, because I see people, very lucky people, that haven't had to struggle very much. Mm-hmm. And how do I put this into words? Like, I just feel grateful that I did have to struggle, because my struggle, things that are hard for me, mm-hmm. are much harder than the things that are harder for them. Yeah. Because when you're put in a war zone, and metaphorically speaking, I have not been to war, but you've gone to war, you've been strengthened. Yeah. So things that are going to be harder for other people are not hard for you anymore.
That's true. I mean, yeah, that could be a whole nother episode about, like, trauma, but
circling back to children loving themselves, though, even if they've had a hard life, they can get there, and they may someday be in a situation where they're thankful for those struggles.
Yeah. I'd like to see a show of hands of listeners if you want to comment. Like, who was well past adulthood when they started finally realizing that they loved themselves? Because I was. I mean, I struggled.
I didn't realize I loved myself. I had to work to love myself.
You're right.
Like,
yeah, that's true.
I could tell that I didn't love myself. Yeah. And I had to actively learn to do that.
That's a better way to put it, yeah. Because I was well into my 20s. And this was after having a child and, like, mm-hmm. being married and, like, mm-hmm. Thinking, wow. I think I remember the time, I think it was 2017, when I was like, holy shit, like, I need to work at this, and then started actively mm-hmm. working. And that was after I had developed skills and, like, done the sober thing and, like, crazy.
So in the comments, tell us how old were you, do you think, when you started to really love yourself? And then what helped you get there? I think that would be really cool to see, if see the different things or the same things that people mm-hmm. have all had affect their self-love relationship.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Fun. Mm-hmm. It would be fun.
And then, just to summarize, because we're nearing the end here, when you're trying to build children that love themselves, I think my overall summary is that we need to, like my daughter said, point out all the very lovable things about them. And when there are things they don't love about themselves, tell them why it's okay to still love those things. Like, you can be perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
And being different is awesome.
Yeah.
And I think repeatedly reminding them of that, because they're in school with these other kids where everybody's trying to be the same and everybody's trying to fit in. Stop trying to fit in. Stand out. Like, you were made to stand out.
That stigma is a real thing, and with our kids on social media all the time, like, it's even harder, I feel like, for this to raise this generation, because they have, like, every access to everything popular and trendy right at their fingertips. So that's
I think we should point out
difficult.
that in social media, the people that are popular are the weird people.
Some of them, yeah.
Think about that. Like, the weird people that were not popular in school are now the famous people online.
That's kind of funny. I do follow a lot of influencers that are the weird, quirky.
Because that's actually awesome.
It is awesome.
Like, being different is awesome.
Yeah.
Shine light on the areas where you are not like everybody else. That's how you build your self-love. By loving that piece of yourself that is different from everybody else.
Yeah. And being comfortable in your own skin.
And then setting a good example by loving yourself. And if you don't love yourself, it's never too late. You could be 80 and start to love yourself. It's never too late to start learning this stuff.
Yep.
Start working on yourself. Start finding reasons why you're wonderful. And what does that look like to you? Like, what did you do to build self-love?
Well, I just knew, like, so mentioning the 2017 thing, I knew that I wasn't happy in my body, which I've had body image issues my entire life.
Same.
So, I knew I wasn't happy in my skin, and I wanted to change that. So I started doing workouts and, like, eating healthy. Like, it's always been a thing. Like, I've always kind of done it in waves, you know? Like, never worked out or eaten healthy consistently. And so this was, like, the second go-around of doing that. And,
That's
like,
definitely part of my self-love journey, too.
Picking myself up again, like, that's huge. And having your kids see that is very important, because that's something
a perspective thing, too, because
recognize.
You could see, if you chose to, you could see that as, oh, you're continuously failing. But instead, you're choosing to see it as, oh, look at me pick myself up and never
We're restarting.
Give up. Yeah, I'm never giving up. I'll keep trying until the end of time.
The glass half full thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was part of my self-love journey, too, like, learning to eat better, and then, like, working on my perspective of how I saw my body. And I always think of this one thing that your daughter said on our Mother's Day episode.
Yeah.
Where she was like, well, this is your face forever, so you might as well get used to it.
Yeah.
And I think about that all the time. I tell people that all the time. Like, this is your body, and this is your face forever.
Forever.
Stop punishing it, and accept that this is who it is. This is what you look like. And love yourself. And then when you can do that, you can accent the things that are beautiful about you.
Yeah, agreed. And that's kind of what I had to learn through that journey, is, like, you know, loving the skin I'm in, and, like, weight is just a number, and measurements are just a number. And I started shifting that perspective of working out to feel good versus working out to be thinner.
I threw away my scale. I don't ever weigh myself.
Lord knows that in our generation, thin is
in.
Yeah, thin is in. And so, and it was like, that was a very hard stigma in my mind to break. You know, I luckily did not have an eating disorder. I would say, if anything, I had an unhealthy relationship with food growing up.
Same.
And so switching, like, actually pregnancy taught me about nutrition.
Yeah, I started working out when I was pregnant.
Because it taught me, like, I needed to eat square meals, and I needed to get all the protein, and I needed to get all the nutrients in, and eat healthy and worry about what's going in my body. So that really was, like, the catalyst to the healthy eating thing. Yeah. But, you know, like I said,
everybody's journey is different, too. Like, for example, I grew up in a family of very beautiful women. And I can remember my mom telling me when I was pretty young, too, like, when you're standing, suck your stomach in. And in her mind, like, she was very beautiful. Beauty is power. And she was trying to teach me the thing that she knew.
Yeah.
at the skill that she knew. And I can see how that was harmful for me at the time, but it was out of a place of love from her. And I grew up surrounded by these people that I just thought were so beautiful, and I just did not feel beautiful. And I feel like a lot of weight was put on how you looked in my family. And it took me a long time to really crawl out from underneath that and to feel beautiful on my own, not in comparison to my family. And what's funny about that is I feel like I did get more beautiful as I started to love myself more.
Yeah.
And I just find that so interesting.
I think it's a perspective thing. And that's kind of to circle back around to the kids, like, the more positive affirmations that you give them and the more opportunities that you give them to see themselves for who they are, that's going to ultimately help with that self-love.
Yeah, and things to build their confidence, like them learning skills or learning to be able to do something on their own without their parents' help. Like, all of those confidence-building things are also self-love-building things.
Yeah.
Like, it's not all the outside, it's the inside, too.
Right. The brain.
Knowing you can, knowing you're worthy, knowing you deserve happiness. It's your God-given right.
And don't settle for less. That was another thing, actually, we talked about is, like, because she saw me start over so many times, like, and not necessarily with, like, my health and wellness, but, like, my entire fucking life sometimes. You know, like, getting a divorce, moving across the country, like, that kind of stuff is crazy. And like, failed relationships and things like that. Like, I could look at that so easy and be like, wow, I've really failed as a parent by allowing my daughter to see all these times that I had to pick up the pieces and start back over. But instead, I choose to see it as, like, I'm grateful that she was able to see me start over and pick up the pieces, because I knew that I wasn't healthy in that relationship and I didn't want that anymore for myself. So that's the perspective that I always tried to instill in her, is like, this is not me failing. Like, I don't look at it as a failed marriage. I don't look at it as a failed relationship. I look at it as, this was not a place where I wanted to be, and I knew my self-worth, so I'm going to walk away from this and start over. Yeah.
So parents, do not give yourselves a hard time, because you can't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And all you can do is continually learn and grow, even as an adult, even into your 30s, 40s, 50s, and on.
Growing up for adults.
Yes. Continue learning and growing, and your kids are going to continue to learn and grow because you're learning and growing.
Yeah. And just share that. I think it's good to be somewhat transparent, as age appropriate as you can. Like, I didn't vent or anything to my daughter, but I definitely let her see when I was sad about something, and you know, like, talk to her at the...
Yeah, it's important to know that sometimes you're going to be sad in life.
Yeah.
And that's not the end of the world. And this is how I worked through it. So that they have those tools and don't just think, well, my parents have never been sad ever, so I should never be sad.
Right.
My parents have never ever fought. That's the thing. Like, I don't think you should yell in front of your kids, like, full on fight, but let them know you're having a disagreement, and then let them know how you worked through it. Because guess what? In relationships, you're going to have disagreements, and you're going to have to work through it.
Yeah. So let them see that healthy side.
Let them see some of that stuff. As they get older, they start to understand that more, and it's important for them to see you work through that.
And how to healthily. Yeah.
And if you don't healthily know how to, you can totally admit that too.
Right. Like, that wasn't a version of my best self. I've said that to Ella. Like, the version that you saw was not that person that I would want to be. I'm sorry you had to see that. Admitting defeat.
There's
That's
nothing
okay
wrong
too.
with admitting that you screwed up. Like, we screw up. We're all human. It's a human experience. You're not going to make the right choice every single time.
Right. Or make the right reaction every single time. Yeah.
Sometimes we're spread thin and we're going to lose our temper or lose our shit, and that's the way it goes.
Right. So I'm glad that we kicked off this mini series of self-love with this episode, because it's going to, you know, we're going to be talking about a lot of childhood growing up things that have to do with self-love this month.
And men and self-love specifically, because I don't feel like that's talked about enough.
Not
we have
enough,
two
no.
men coming on
Yes.
later this month. One that realized he was gay when he was living in a Mormon family.
Ooh, that's gonna be that's
one that has been to war and has been through a lot of personal stuff in his life and has figured out how to still be vulnerable and manly at the same time.
Mm-hmm. It's gonna be amazing.
And then we have some girls coming on to talk about their different journeys and what self-love looks like and why it's been harder or easier for them, which will be, I feel like, a really fun episode too.
That is going to be fun. We have so many good guests this month.
Oh my gosh, this whole season we have so many good guests. I feel so
the whole season.
lucky that we've had the cool people on that we've had on.
Yeah.
So if you were one of our guests this year, previously or coming up, I just want to say thank you and how much we appreciate you.
Yeah.
And if there's anybody that wants to be a guest on the podcast, please reach out to us.
Ooh, yeah.
Or if you know somebody that would be perfect or that you want to hear us interview, reach out to us because we really love that.
Yeah, we do too, yeah. So stay tuned for the rest of the month for self-love and all of the goodness that we will bring. And drop in the comments if you guys want to hear anything. We're always open to feedback.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome.
Love you.
Till next time.
Love yourself.
Love yourself.